Hi, this is Bob from Turbot. If you're looking for a quick demo of Turbot Guardrails features, you're in the right spot. In this demo, we're going to show how Turbot Guardrails can help you manage a multi-cloud identity model across Amazon, Azure, and Google. Turbot Guardrails has a heap of identity management features, from managing your IAM configurations, the perimeter around those configurations, to deploying identities across your Amazon, Azure, and Google environments, managing policy attachments, least privilege controls. We can also manage preventative controls to block people from doing things they shouldn't do. And we can also manage multiple directories, multiple IDPs that become centralized into your Turbot Guardrails workspace. And then you can manage a federated model across your different teams. A lot to get into, but for the intention of this demo, we're just going to show off these features from an AWS standpoint, but they're relatively similar for Azure and Google as well. As a common scenario, folks might look at Turbot Guardrails as a central hub to manage permissions across their users. So on the Permissions tab, you can manage all different types of policies. So, managing folks with permissions in the Turbot console here or through the API. You can manage also then credentials down to Amazon and Azure and Google, and assign different levels of roles. Or if you're using our user-based model, you can manage users and associate them to groups. And so there's two different models from an Amazon standpoint that we could support: is a role-based model and or a user-based model in your cloud accounts. So first examples I'll show is that Bob here is logged in and authenticated from a Google directory. So I authenticated in with my turbot.com Google Auth. And from here, this is a jumping point for me to get into one or many cloud accounts. And so if I wanted to take this Bob demo environment, look at my access across that ecosystem, which is a multi-cloud ecosystem, so my Google project, my Azure subscription, or my Amazon account. Here in my Amazon account, I have two roles assigned to me. I can log in as like a metadata, like a read-only, a light read-only user, or I can log in with a super user rights with more elevated permissions. And so here I could just federate in, and then I'm logging in as Bob, assuming the super user role in a time-based session. And so that is one alternative, is to use a role-based model. The other is to use a user-based model where Bob's associated to permissions, which I'll show later. In Turbot, I have some things favored here, but if I had access to a number of cloud accounts, I might use my profile page to browse my different projects, my subscriptions, my accounts, and then use this as my way to switch clouds, switch Amazon accounts, etc. The type of roles that are defined, Turbot Guardrails defines very consistent roles across Amazon, Azure, and Google. And so we have like a metadata, a read-only, an operator, admin, super user. And so all those levels are defined consistently that you can use as roll-up permissions across each cloud provider, or you can define very specific ones like an Amazon EC2 admin or an RDS metadata role that can then be associated to your users. These roles are managed by Turbot. They're updated by Turbot as new identity actions come to be, then update our Turbot Guardrails role policies. Now you can use them out of the box, and you can define how you want to associate those roles across your environment. So you might not want to offer the S3 permission levels in all of your accounts. So you could say maybe in a few accounts, or this grouping of accounts, or this organization might allow for these type of permissions to be assigned. And so you could pick which type of roles are applicable per different parts of your org. Now, if you don't agree with the permission levels that we define, you can also modify those permission levels on your own. You can extend or modify our permission model, so you could cherry pick IAM actions that then get managed to those different levels. Here it's saying, an S3 get object is on the read-only policy, where none of the policies have delete bucket. Whatever your posture is, you can define your own modifications on top of our roles. Along with those roles, you can define preventative controls that are lockdown and boundary policies. If you wanted to give maybe more permissive rights of like an S3 star, but you want to restrict some permissions within there. So you might allow someone to use S3, but not to manage ACLs or to make things publicly exposed or to manage cross-replication administration. You can have policies that are very specific down to the account on which permissions are allowed or not allowed within those levels. As another alternative, you can bring your own roles. If you already deployed your own roles, You can associate them to Guardrails for it to manage, or you can actually have Turbot Guardrails deploy your IAM roles. If you wanted to hook up a SaaS provider and you wanted to deploy those roles across one or many accounts, or you had some other like security operations role that you wanted to define and then deploy, you can use Turbot Guardrails stack policies to define that permutation, and then Turbot Guardrails will not only deploy it, but also manage the configuration drift of those resources. When you have the right roles that are defined, that's where the permission page comes into play, where it's a central hub to manage those permissions across your users. Now, this is our console, but everything can be done through the GraphQL API, as well as our Terraform provider. Here, you'll see that I had a custom example role that I deployed through those stacks, and then I associated those permissions to the user. In this Bob Amazon account, I have this example role associated. Now, to grant permissions, it's really straightforward. You're just setting your resource scope. Here, I'm looking at my demo organization. So I have an Acme business unit. Within that business unit, I have a shared services area, and I have this Amazon account. And so here, I'm specifically putting permissions on that Amazon account for which users. So here, I'll just pick myself, and I'll just assign this Amazon super user role. I can now choose, do I want that role activated now, or is it pre-approved for later? And then you can also expire that grant of permission. So here I might say, well, no, Bob is always a super user in this Acme shared services account, or I could say any period of time or some custom period of time that he's granted those permissions, and then Turbot Guardrails will revoke him out of those permissions. And so for the purpose of the demo, I'll just say he's granted an hour. So now I have a time-based permission associated to myself. And if I go back to my homepage here and just refresh the screen, now I have that option to log into that shared service account with Amazon super user role. Get back in. All right, now we're logged in as Bob, assuming that super user role with a time-based credential in this account. If I go to IAM, to show you how this works behind the scenes is that we have a number of roles that we're managing. So that super user role or that S3 admin role, or a read-only role, those are roles that are being managed by Turbot, being synced in to this environment. So as you define roles, like that example role that was deployed, those are all things that Turbot will then manage behind the scenes and always ensure that they're meeting the configuration desired state. Alternatively, if a role-based model is not the right fit, we can also support you on a user-based model. So in a user-based model is where you might have individual users, maybe you also have roles as well. And so it could be a combination of the two. General best practice is that you're using IAM roles, and with a tool like Turbot Guardrails, we can help you manage that at scale with time-based credentials, with a lot of least privilege and preventative controls wrapped around it. You might have the need to either have users with more permanent access or permanent access keys, or maybe you have some different collaboration use cases that you want to define users instead of using roles. A number of customers that we've worked with, they actually appreciate user management because it's actually more manageable at scale with a tool like Guardrails. It's because roles can sprawl to hundreds or thousands of different roles for all the different permutations that you might set for all the nuances. Like, Bob might need an Amazon S3 admin with this EC2 metadata with this tweak of permissions, and that's a one role profile. And then a slight different variance would require another role profile. And so all of a sudden you might have hundreds or thousands of roles and they become unwieldy to manage. Alternatively, if you can manage users consistently and then associate group permissions to them, that gives you a more flexible option to assign different policies to the user that might be permanent or transient, and they could be more nuanced. And so it gives you much more flexibility. Different companies have different posture, but the good news is that Guardrails can support you in either or both. In this model, we have someone like Barry who has already those permissions that we had set. So going back to the permissions page, Barry has an EC2 admin role, RDS metadata, and S3 admin, and those are similarly assigned to him in his Amazon account that Turbot Guardrails is managing. But he also has these deny and lockdown policies that will wrapper those preventative controls on his user as well. If we wanted to assign groups, so each one of these are just groups. For example, if I had a security ops group, well, you can associate that to Turbot. For example, if you had custom groups like a security ops or cloud team admins or your audit team or whatever your group definition is, you can associate your current groups, and then Turbot's then able to manage those through the console here. And so here, for example, like Adam has cloud team admin group membership. or Bill has that security ops membership, all managed just similarly like how we were assigning permissions earlier. And so that gives you flexibility. And then same thing with stacks. I can use a stack and I can deploy the groups and manage those through Turbot. So whether you're bringing your own groups or Turbot is deploying your own custom groups and then managing it from there, a lot of optionality for you to leverage and support you on your user-based model as well. Now, there's a lot to unpack, and we would love to talk to you. If you have any interest in using these features, please reach out to us at turbot.com/start.